Hey everybody, my name is Aaron Shane. Welcome to Habitat Now. It is my honor to have you join me as we learn about the life work and career of artist Monette Larsen. She's new to our Habitat family. We have her work in the gallery, which is really exciting, and we have the only work available, and we only represent her in the States, so it's great to have her visit us and join us via this Habatat-Zoom. Take over your screen real quick and go through a little upcoming housekeeping. First and foremost, we do these Zooms every Saturday, usually, depending on life. And if you don't have a link, they're on our website under the Zoom button. You click it under this little hamburger here and it pops up. And I think I might have replaced a button on top recently, which is kind of fun. Upcoming November 2nd, we have an exhibition in a pretty good amount of time, and we're so excited for the show of Dimitra Thenofanis and Dean Benson. It's going to be so much fun. They're going to be here in town right before Halloween. They're going to be here setting up, and the show's right afterwards. So if you're in town near Royal Oak, we also just won Best Gallery in Royal Oak at our local Metro Times. I posted on Facebook about that, which is kind of fun. Always nice to be recognized. So come and see us experience this exhibition. If you can't come for the grand opening, I was just telling Bob to come after. We'd love to show you around ourselves. It's going to be an amazing experience. So Bird and Corey are currently on the Glass Tour in Seattle, which is coming to an end this weekend. It's been an incredible time. People have had so much fun. This is a photo from an earlier trip from Italy, but following up, they've had some good results. And following up from the Italian show, we just sold a Lino piece. Look at this masterpiece that was just sold out of the studio out from Italy. So we're excited to be partnering more with Lino, finding work and having people acquire masterpieces in this day and age, especially at this caliber. Now we're going to talk about the Glass Coast Weekend, which is happening in Sarasota, January 9th through 12th. We're just hammering out the details, making sure everything's, I guess, kosher post-hurricane down there, working with the college and putting a whole plan together. We're so excited to put the idea out, the plan out this upcoming week, and we hope to see you there. Mark it in your calendars down in Sarasota in January. It's going to be incredible. We're going to see Barbara Bash, visit the museums, institutions. It's going to be a life-changing event, and Richard Royal is going to be doing a demo for us down there, which is incredible. So save the date. It's going to be great. So without further ado, Monette, it's an honor to have you join me today to learn about your work. And we have it in the gallery. It's always been eye-catching. The passion that you create with and the casting style is so unique. So I'm so excited for today's talk. So welcome to our Habitat family. I'm going to show you a little bit of a preview I'm putting up on Instagram after this too, that will get people to watch this post talk via YouTube. So we have a little bit of a sample of the work that's available in the gallery, and they are just absolutely beautiful. And I'm looking forward to learning more with this talk today. So Monette, thanks for joining me today. Say hello.
Hello.
Perfect. Well, I'll have you
Hi.
take over your screen. It's great to have you join me today. Let me stop sharing on my end. So we had the work in the gallery for our Glass Coast Weekend and our International, and we're giving it more of a prominent appearance now here for the spotlight today. So thanks, Monette. Go ahead and take over the screen. I'd love to start the presentation. I did discover recently on Facebook you can actually talk over your slides. So I may be doing that in the future, which is kind of wild. So thanks, Monette. Go ahead and click on the bottom button to maximize the screen. And I think you
Oh,
would be good.
am I not doing that now?
Nope, you're not on full screen just yet.
Oh,
You're on the
what-
PowerPoint screen, presentation habitat screen. You go to the very bottom of the screen. Oh, you just stop sharing. Go ahead and share again. You were sharing. That was working. That part of it is
oh, that's
working.
working.
Yeah, go ahead and share, and then click
There we
on full
go.
full screen on the bottom, on the right side there. Below apply to all in a little. Um,
Ah,
well, nope, don't click that. Down below it to the left. That little screen right
oh
there.
God.
Yep, right
There
there.
we
There
go.
you go. Perfect.
Yeah,
All right,
thank you.
cool. No problem on that. Thank you. And the floor is yours.
Yeah, apparently I'm not wonderful at screen sharing. Sorry about that. Um, so I'm Monette Larsen. Yes. Uh, so I thought I'd start off by telling you a little bit about my story. So I currently live in London, but I am actually Danish. Um, So I thought I'd just show you a little about where I've lived and where I'm from. So I oh, why is it not working? Sorry. Here we go. So I grew up here in Denmark, just south of Copenhagen. And I started my glass journey now almost 20 years ago. So it's 20 years in January since I went off to um, uh, do a little course, well, 6 months course in glassblowing at a so in Denmark you have this type of boarding school for adults, and I knew I wanted to do something creative before I was going to go and do something really serious. And so I went off and did a glassblowing course. And within 3 months, I was so hooked that I decided I needed to go and do a degree. So I applied to go to, then it was called the Glass and Ceramics School, but now it's called the Royal Danish Academy of Art, I think, for glass and ceramics, on this tiny little island called Bornholm. So you might have heard of it. Some of you might have visited even. There's quite a big sort of glass community there. And then they run a contest every 4 years for glass and every 4 years for ceramics. Um, and this is my graduation work that I did back then. It was based on sort of different structures of glass. So as you can see, I've changed from being a glass blower to being a caster or kiln former. Because to start, I just got hooked on the glass blowing, and then coming from a crafty sort of family, I realized that you can't be good at everything. And I really like the precision that you can get with kiln forming that I never really achieved in my 3 years of glass blowing. So I changed my ways and decided to focus on kiln form glass. And after I graduated, I got a job in the UK, and I moved over to the West and worked for a couple of artists called Sally Fox and Richard Jackson. And this is some of the work that I did then. So I developed the work that I'd already done before and kind of made it bigger. That's the one on the left. And then I also worked on some new work based on, it's also based on structures, but of butterfly wings. And was the other work. Then I worked there for 4 years. And then after that, I went to the Royal College of Art and I did the work on the right on the screen. Presuming it's on the right on your screen too. Oh, sorry, distracted here. So they are kiln formed wall installations. They are based on corals, which also my current work is. So I'm really fascinated by the structure of how corals grow, not the colors and the movement as well. And in my MA, I explored how you could use that to create bigger sort of wall installations out of smaller pieces. And I think, oh, but I just go two over. So this is my graduation, some of my graduation work that I did then. So I presume you'll just ask questions if you have any. So they are made out of tiny little beads that were tack fused together. So kind of taken on some of my early work where I played a lot around with tack fusing. I used that to create sort of the coral shape and then putting them together. But I really wanted to get into making the more correct structure of corals, which is, oh, sorry, which is this other piece on the left, which is the sort of work I focus more on now, but I still do both types of work. So the one on the left is the type of work that Aaron has in the gallery now. So my work is based on corals, which hopefully you can see.
Mhm.
And I am particularly interested in the structure of how corals grow. There is a theory that what we perceive as beautiful is linked to how we perceive the underlying structure of something. So I'm actually really interested in how you can take an underlying structure and then make something that I consider beautiful from that. So I've I play around with using the underlying structure of corals to produce my current work. So we're going to look a little bit about that later. So first, I have a little bit about my wool work. So I mainly make this wool work to commission because quite often are quite large and they need somewhere to go because they are not really a piece unless they're all put up together. So from my graduation work, I got a very large commission of an 8 meter long wall that I made for an apartment in London. And since then, I have made a series of different ones. So this is the smallest one I've made to date, which is only 29 pieces, I think. Um, and a private commission for another house in London. They specifically wanted to have it on a board, so I played around with how you could make different boards to make it stand out more because they also had quite a dark room with not a lot of natural light. And as you probably know, glass really loves this sort of natural light. So you kind of want it in the window where it's going to change throughout the day, but if you can't have that, then how are you going to do it? Um, and I used a lot of the colors in the room. It was a very sort of colorful room that had a lot of arts in there that I wanted to sort of help display alongside mine. And here's another one. So I think this one speaks for itself, really. It goes with the books, and the client really wanted to have greens in there. So I've and something very bright, autumny. So it's quite proud to do this one because the wall had been empty for 23 years by the time I actually chose my work to go on there. So I felt like that was quite an honor.
Does the work always mount to a board, or can it go directly in the wall without a
It can
board?
go directly on the wall.
Okay.
So the first ones I did, this one
Mhm.
is directly on the wall,
Okay.
and this one is directly into the wall as well.
Gotcha. But they're installed on site, right? It's not like a board
Yes,
that
they're
ships
installed
to
on
the.
site. They all come apart.
Okay.
They're a little bit of a pain to ship because they all come apart, so they all have to be packed individually. Because also you can probably tell they're quite fragile. Um,
Beautiful.
but it's sort of sorry. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. So about my other work, so I think that's probably what most come to hear about, which is the work that you have in the gallery. So they start out as a crochet.
Hmm.
Uh, so this work is cast. And Erin tells me that you will understand what that means. So you've got to say if I need to explain that in more detail. Um, so the type of corals that I'm really interested in is based on this hyperbolic plane. So a mathematician has worked out how to do that, and they did um, as an art, like a community art project. They did the crochet coral reef. And therefore, they shared instructions of how to create your own hyperbolic planes. And so I took those instructions and I did a little crochet and I had it hanging around for a really long time before I knew what to do with it. So the other work for the ones who are glass artists, they might know that glass doesn't really want to stretch into some really tight curves. And so I really tried some of my first wall installations. I tried to get it to bend into the extreme curves, but that kind of technique doesn't really lend itself to create the sort of precise mathematical shape that I really was after. And with my crochet sitting around, I in the end came up with how I could then create molds and cast it into glass.
Hmm.
So these are my very first experiments for 15 of this kind of, they are quite small, sort of hand size little pieces where I just played around with how I could use the shapes to create new shapes and then play around with texture. Um, so yes, I did my crochet. I then made a mold from those in silicon so I could cast multiples in wax and then I could carve them. So all of these are carved in the wax, and then having quite a big background in code working and grinding glass and polishing glass. I've in the middle one, I polished the edge, played around with that. The one on the top left, I really went at it with carving it with sandblasting, making it thinner. The other ones, I wanted to just see how I could carve and create different textures and how that would work. Um, I then moved on to go a little bit bigger, and this was the first bigger piece I've made. And this is very similar to a couple of pieces that Erin has in the gallery, but this one was sort of the first one in the sort of series of those. Um, Also made in 15 because that year I did a residency at a university here in the UK. And there was an end of sort of year exhibition, and I wanted to really make something that was a bit bigger for that, and therefore I made this one. Which since went on to be showing at the British Glass Biennale, and I won 2 prizes for it actually. So that was quite proud of
Congratulations, that's great. Are the molds destroyed in the process? The ones you crochet?
No, so the crochet, so it slightly depends on how you do it, but I do reuse the crochet because crochet takes a really long time. I don't know if you've ever crocheted, Aaron, but it does, it's quite time
It's been a
consuming.
bit.
So especially if the bigger you go, so my current work is generally much bigger than the first ones we saw, which is sort of hand sized. And basically the crochet takes a long time. So no, I don't think anyone would ever buy my work if I could only make one from each crochet. So I reused the crochet. So for these pieces, I made molds and made a wax from it. So I could carve it really heavily.
Mhm.
So I'm not quite sure what my next slide is. Oh, so yeah, so I could carve it really heavily on these ones. And then I've since moved on to actually make my molds directly from the crochet. So now I do both methods. So I both use my crochet to make molds from, which is what is in this video here. So this one, you sewed a couple of these pieces for me at your glass tour. Um, and so these ones, I do the crochet, I then solidify it and make a mold to cast waxes in. And then once the wax comes out, I can change the waxes and make them all different. So they're all the same original shape, but I then change them. I play around with the colors, how you can get the glass to flow into the molds, which is something that is sort of a continuous exploration for me, is how you pack the mold, the glass. So when you cast the glass, you make the mold and you steam the wax out, and then the glass sits on top of the mold. And depending on how you place the glass on top of the mold, you can plan to some extent how your colors are going to go in. But obviously, depending on the shape, they'll go in differently every time. So the more you cast and the more you play around with placing your color, the better you get at predicting how it's going to go in.
Gotcha. Will you play that video one more time and then
Yes.
in the slide so we can kind of see what you're talking about in the way where you're making the
Right, so I have the
wax?
crochet, I dip it in. I could probably pause on the way. So here I'm solidifying it in some water because obviously wax is hot and then you need to solidify it. Then I cover up the texture. So quite often people think that the texture comes from the crochet, but for me, the texture of the crochet isn't particularly wonderful. So there's nothing wrong with crochet texture. Crochet texture is wonderful if you're doing crochet. But I really am interested in getting the correct mathematical shape. And so therefore I cover up the texture so I can put new texture in
Oh, very
if I
interesting.
want texture. So here I've made a silicon mold, and then that was my wax. Sorry. So this was my waxes. So one of them, I think that one is particularly that first green one up at the top left
Mhm.
on this series of pieces. And so I've carved in on the different pieces, I've carved in the different textures. Um, and then here I'm just checking the kiln, and then that is the mold coming out. And
And
then
that
you break it apart.
and
It's a
that but
one-time use mold.
and that bucket above it is where you put the color in, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so
yes.
that's what
You
we're
can just see on this picture that you can see a little bit of the color is left up at the top.
Mhm.
So Yes. So
Very
depending
cool.
on how you place it in, so you can see on the pieces how different the coloring has gone in, and that is all to do with placement.
Do you use sprues?
Yes.
Those three little green spots, is that where the sprues are?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Well, they're really complex, and as a glass caster, I really appreciate how beautifully you do it.
Thank you. Yes. Well, it has taken a lot of practice
Mhm.
and to get it out right. And obviously, sometimes they don't work, especially when I do a new shape. There's a little bit of trial and error in getting the glass to flow in correctly. Um, so so I can't see who asked the question, but it basically, if you will know that casting glass is tricky and getting thin things to flow upwards is hard. Um, so I've spent quite a long time figuring out how my program should be for that particular piece because all of the pieces are slightly different. So then you break the mold apart, and then the glass will come out. And so here I've already cut off all the excess, but there'll be all those sprues that someone was talking about. Um, is all cut off and cleaned up. So they look quite rough at this point. And then there's no picture of that, but I do a whole bunch of grinding um, and smoothing out to make them look how I want them. And then they're sandblasted, which I'm sure most of you know, where you spray sand at high speeds at the glass. The reason I do that is because it will give the glass a uniform surface as opposed to the ground surface. Then you can go back and put in different surfaces if you want. Um, it's how I work. So I do my textures in two ways. I either add it into the waxes or I add it into the glass once the glass is finished, like an engraving technique.
Yeah, we've noticed the pieces in the gallery that it's like real organic life, where half of it, the top surface, has the texture and the bottom is very smooth. And it has a real natural feel and appearance from your
Yes,
efforts. So it's great to see in real life too.
yes. Thank you. So I think the next one, this is also a little video. Oh, if it wants to play, there we go. So this is a bigger one. And so the next slide, I want to show you how many, so this is me grinding. So this is how I spend most of my days is doing that. So I have used that same crochet for all of these pieces.
Hmm.
So it's just to show how different things come out. So if throughout the process, I make a lot of choices of how it's going to be. So for all of these, I have used that crochet, but every time I want to make a piece, I form the crochet. I will make the mold directly around it. And then I basically I make the hole into the mold big enough that I can get it back out. Because as I said before, they take a really long time to make the crochet. So I just don't think anyone would um, pay that kind of money for the work, really, to be very upfront. And so they come out different. Also, I don't have a big interest in doing production. I'm really interested in how each piece can be its own and be itself. So even when I do commissions on this kind of work, I never make the same. I make the next in the series. Um, one could have a similar piece, but it would never be the same. Also, because I quite often run in the glass in different ways, then even if you could, especially if you do color mixing, they just don't come out the same.
Those are beautiful.
Thank you. Questions at this point?
We're
So,
just
sorry.
we're just taking the best of the wonderful tones and the
Yes,
coloring
so
of the
you have
pieces.
the piece on the top left in the gallery.
Right, and the one on top right.
Yes. Right, left. Oh, yes. The blue and pink one. Oh, and the top right. Oh, you have the both top corners,
Right.
actually. Sorry.
The dual
Yes.
piece on the left and the single purple on the right.
Yes.
They're
Um,
absolutely
so
stunning.
on Thank you. So the one up on the purple piece, I have carved all the texture in. It's actually quite thin. And one of the thinnest pieces I've done with texture both sides where I've pulled the crochet out. So very similar to my earlier work, which I have some pictures of the other two you have, which is a little bit earlier, where I did quite heavy carving into it. So the purple one, I've carved into the wax and no. Um, and the blue one underneath, I've carved into the glass. So you get quite a different texture. You get sort of like a sharper texture when you grind into the glass and a sort of softer texture when you grind into the wax. So I really like to play around with how you can get it to look different depending on how you're going to work with it. Move on to the next one. So because the next one's all about texture. So just to show off the different sort of texture I've been working on. So very recently I've been working on the first two pictures where I've been putting in just part texture on the piece as opposed to doing like a whole surface. The green and the sort of amber piece to the rest of the top row, they're carved on the back. And what you get is when you get sort of like a look through the front surface. Because I don't polish the glass, you kind of get like a sort of slightly obscure view of the texture as you see through it. Which I like to think they sort of remind me of sort of like a mushroom texture or like the sort of coral texture that you get sort of different, that it changes as it moves. And the two bottom ones are from the little ones. And then you can see the sort of subtle texture you get from carving in to the wax sculpture on the bottom right. Which is the piece you have in the gallery that has like a little color swell in it, which you could just see at the top of that picture here. So these are one of the other pieces, one of the pieces you have at the gallery called Evolving Movements. So these are sort of earlier work. I think I made them back in 2018. So I don't actually really make this kind of pieces anymore because the process is a little bit different. So I've shaped the crochet, and then I've made a mold to cast a wax, and then I've carved into the wax. So I don't have these molds anymore, so I can't remake them. And then so I did very heavy carving to start and really sort of work with the edges and try to get edges to look like they were ripped and sort of like they've really been worked on if they were in the sea. And I think you can see the same on this one, which is also has the same sort of texture and is made the same way. And then I've sort of moved on basically to make start thinking about how they could be grouped. And so this was a group piece. This one I also, before I traveled to you, showed at the British Glass Biennale. This one is sort of like a play with color and a play with putting pieces together. And I've since making this one, I made a commission for a yacht that had 4 pieces that were meant to sit together. The yacht isn't quite finished yet, so I'm still waiting for pictures from the actual boat, which I'm hoping is going to appear at some point. Yes. So I didn't know what to say about this one. Don't know if you have any questions.
It's definitely 2 separate pieces that sit next to each other, and there's a detailed shot that I have. I'll show if you don't have it. It's kind of amazing up close.
Yes, I don't know if I don't have a detailed shot on here.
Okay, I'll show it then when we're done. Feel free to keep going.
And
Are they attached? Are they attached?
They are not attached. No, they are separate pieces. They just sit really closely together. The blue piece of these ones are the first one I made where I experimented with pulling the crochet out the mold. And so what I then, so I really like the piece, but what I didn't like so much is when you take the little piece away, it's got quite a large base because I was really worried about how to get the crochet out. And so therefore I thought, oh, I want to put something with it so it's not so, it felt really heavy, and a lot of my other work is not so heavy. And I'm sure by now you can see that I really enjoy making things that are really light, fragile, thin. That's sort of more my style and the sort of thing I really like, and I get really excited about playing with. And so having something that was really heavy, so it feels really grounded as a piece, but I felt it was a bit heavy. Also, the color is quite dark down the bottom, and I really wanted something to go with it. And so therefore after having it sitting around for a bit, I decided that it needed to have and another piece, and also from a sort of my artistic practice, it was a thing that was on my list. Like I really wanted to put some together. I have some currently working on some little projects where sort of on the side of my sort of bigger work, how I could make more pieces sit together and create more groups. But yes, so they don't attach, no. They sit together. In principle, if you liked it, you could have them apart. I just don't think that obviously that's not how I envisioned it.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So, as a caster, I understand how difficult your process is and how difficult it is to get the glass into the small spaces. Are you using leaded glass to help your flow?
I did to start. Now I don't necessarily. Now I choose my glass based on the colors I want, as opposed to what kind of glass it is.
Okay, thank you.
So for the ones who don't know, so leaded glass flows at a lower temperature, and therefore you can get it to run into thinner gaps. Um, so casters obviously often think, oh, you need to have leaded glass to get it to run into thinner gaps. It's a little bit harder to get hold of leaded glass now, and so I have developed how I can cast them without having leaded glass. Also, it gives you more color options, and I'm quite keen on having color in my work.
This piece is gorgeous. Yeah. This piece is absolutely stunning. They're all stunning.
Thank you. So I think that might be the end of my slides. I have a couple more if you need them, but I don't know if you have some questions first.
We'll take a look at what else you got. Feel free. I love the way this one stands up also.
Yeah, so actually this one stands in two ways. So it also sits on the other way, which I think, so this is actually the process pictures, or some of the process pictures from this piece. So you can see how I've cut on the first picture, I've covered the wax, covered it in wax. And at this point, they look really quite sort of crude. It's very much about getting the shape and getting it all covered. And then the next pictures, I've spent probably a couple of days carving in and carving all the texture in to get it to look right. And this was the first one where I've actually carved so much texture into both sides on one where the crochet still was in there. And then the glass comes like this, like big blocks of glass. And then that is what sits above the mold. So you make that little bowl on top, and then you put the glass in there, and then the glass goes and the mold goes in the kiln. You dry the mold out, and then you heat it up until the glass runs in. And then you cool it down slowly, so it'll be in the kiln for 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that. Then it comes out, and so this first picture is where it's just come out. And it's looking a little rough still. And then I go back in, you obviously clean it up and grind it down. Any imperfections from the mold, I like to take away. I'm quite a perfectionist. And so I'll spend quite a long time grinding, making it as nice as possible. I think each piece should be the best that piece could be. So I spend a fair amount of time trying to get to that point, and then so obviously mid-process still, and then the end piece at the end. And then, so I just want to show a bit of the other sort of shapes I do. So I've very recently, so I don't know if you back at my inspiration pictures right at the start. I'm just going to go back if I will. No, here we go. Right, so I've so the sort of corals on the left are the ones I've been working lots with, and then I have lately been looking a lot of sort of how sort of like seaweed or like bits of coral with flow. They will grow in the same sort of hyperbolic plane way, and so how they flow in the sea and how they would move, and these pieces. Don't know if you could just go skip ahead. Just going to skip ahead back to that slide. No? Sorry. I've been playing with how you could get that kind of feeling. So how you'd like stop a movement right in the middle of it moving. So these pieces have been trying to capture like a moment and make them like they are moving or dancing. And then so when you walk around them, they just change as you go. So it almost feels like the piece is moving. And so lately I've been playing around a lot around with this shape. So they've kind of evolved. So the big blue one up at the top is very new from this year. While the bottom left is an older piece and one of the first ones I did in this kind of style. More thinking more about how you stop a movement in mid-air or yeah, solidify a movement. I don't know if you can say that. And these are just a couple of other pieces, so much more. So these are made in the same way where I pull the crochet out, but they have much less of a base. I've really liked to sort of figure out how you can make something feel like it's floating. Yes. And then playing with texture, playing with color is my sort of thing. I think that may be my slides. Any questions for anything, these?
That's great. Does that wrap up your slideshow?
I think that wraps up my slideshow.
Okay, go ahead and stop sharing your screen if you don't mind. What a great presentation. I now have a grasp on some of what you do. I don't quite know how it's all done because when you start making the pieces with flowing bases in the air and you're saying you're moving the crochet while it's hot, it's kind of wild to get an idea of what it started from to what it come to the end, what it came at the end. So very
I
fun.
think it's a little bit mind-boggling, and I think a lot of people get quite lost when I start talking about crochet because also it's very much a handicraft sort of thing, and so people, I think some people get a little bit put off by the fact that it starts off as crochets and then turns into glass, but I think so. I think a lot of people are fascinated by the fact that that is what it is. For me, it's much more about the shape, and
Right.
it's the only way you can create that shape.
Well, I mean, it's a tool to a means to an end. It's just a tool you
Yes.
know how to use to create the forms you want before it becomes magical glass, as we all know in this business. When it comes to fruition, it becomes something completely different. But that is
Yes.
an incredible collection of work. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen real quick, just because I have some of the slides of the work we have in the gallery, or pieces we have in the gallery, and then just show the details because I have them all, I think, on this robot here. So uh, we have them all on our website right now. Monette and I are able to connect and get the proper photos. And price list is available for these works, and these are the only works available as far as I know. And we're honored to have them in the show. So this is a two-part piece we were talking about earlier, and you can see they're slightly separated in the formal photo, but they do fit together really well. And look at the detail and coloring in this thing. It has all the aspects of glass we truly love. And in front of natural light or a backlit wall, they would be just treasures. And this is the other piece we have in the gallery. I took a video of this piece too, which I'll be promoting online later on. And you can see it kind of floats too in that particular image.
Yes, also you could see in your images how it sits in two ways. So I only showed them from one way, from this way, but it also sits basically also sits flat.
Right.
Which I quite like when things can move and they will change. Part of my process and also what I really sort of care about is that if they are 3D pieces, they're not things that you would put against the wall, really. You'd want it somewhere where you can move around it so you can see it from all sides. Because
So I gotta ask you, what drew you to the coral in general?
I don't have a proper answer.
You don't. Just nature in itself.
It is to do. So obviously I'm from Denmark. There is not a lot of coral. There is loads of seaweed. Loads and loads of seaweed, not the nice type of seaweed that looks wonderful. It's just seaweed. It's to do with shape and color. I always get asked if I go diving. I don't go diving yet, but I will. But it's I love going to the aquarium. I like the shapes. I think I'm obsessed with shape, and I'm also obsessed with how things are built. So it's very much about the structure of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
it does.
It's
it fits
something
into the
that
categories.
it has a mathematical shape, but it feels unstructured, right? It feels like it's random, but actually it's very structured shape that you could build up.
And it's also alive, which is also another fun part about the world, the undersea world of coral. Great. Well, thank you, Monette. This is an honor to have you join me today. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, hit that bell. I think we're at 499 subscribers, which is ridiculous, but it's kind of fun to be able to get some people who really like glass. The format we do isn't really a YouTube format. It's kind of just a way of getting the content out there for the artists we know and love in our Habatat family. Well, thank you again, Monette. If anybody has any questions, it's a great time to ask, but we'll be doing this again next week, hopefully, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. I'm going to stop recording.